Alright, show of hands. Who here knows how big the Great Ape or Oozaru form of Dragon Ball is? Well, if any of you have your hands up, you are bold-faced liars because Toriyama invented them and even he seems to draw these guys at radically different sizes. Even within the same chapter sometimes. There's something intoxicating about noticing a mistake in a work of fiction. Whether it be the coffee cup from Game of Thrones, Daniel San's illegal kick in Karate Kid, or the countless plot holes across the illustrious Friends TV show. For someone like me who spent a frankly embarrassing amount of time examining the story of Dragon Ball, it's easy for me to point and draw attention to the subtle brilliance many of you might have missed. Through my countless read-throughs of Dragon Ball, I've shared so much of what made Akira Toriyama incredible to me. However, I've also intentionally withheld some of my favorite discoveries from those read-throughs. Those being plot holes, inconsistencies, and contrivances. Naturally, you might be thinking I'm crazy for suggesting these elements are anything other than a plague within the Dragon Ball property. However, for me, they do more than offer minor frustrations or even a cheap laugh. For me, after some time, they began to offer something the very best of Dragon Ball never could. A brief but very real peek behind the curtain. These chinks in the armor of Dragon Ball's story allowed me to look past the polished magnum opus that was Akira Toriyama's Dragon Ball and see the artifacts of a young artist trying to make sense of his story in real time. And so today I'm going to outline some of the most notorious and lesser known plot holes, inconsistencies, and contrivances even from Dragon Ball. And who knows, maybe this peek behind the curtain will paint a clearer picture of the late and great Akira Toriyama for you all. Something I should disclose from the outset here is that this won't be counting down all the retcons in the Dragon Ball series. Making a video like that would be idiotic, so exhausting it would drive me insane, and you can watch it by clicking the top right hand corner there, and no, I am not proud of it. I'm also not going to be getting into power scaling. Despite it being an area millions are obsessed with, it's not really something that interests me much, and it's also an area that has been beaten to death over the last 15 years. Plus, who needs power levels when you have Goku's Oozaru form exploding out of Pilaf's castle one moment and then shrinking down to being a little taller than a small bus the next? All of this happens in chapter 22, which, for those of you keeping track at home, was the Oozaru's very first action sequence of the series. I like this moment because it demonstrates a young Toriyama's inexperience with needing to keep track of such enormous characters. He clearly needed Goku to break out of the castle, but he also needed him to be short enough for Yamcha to hold down his tail. Thankfully, the next time he whipped out this form during the 21st Tenkaichi Budokai, he was very consistent in the character's sizing, by keeping him roughly the size of a small building. That is until Gohan and Vegeta transform into the Oozaru during the Saiyan Saga, and we're right back to giant monkeys the size of skyscrapers again. Though I suppose you could make the case that Goku's Oozaru is just weirdly small? I mean, he is a lower class warrior after all. Moving things along, looking back, one might conclude that with villains like Frieza, Vegeta, and Cell, Toriyama had those big bad stories on lock from day one. However, that's not really the case. While there's plenty to love about the likes of Tao Pai Pai's ruthless characterization, the story surrounding his introduction had a lot of, well, shall we say, convenient moments. Firstly, Goku finds the Dragon Ball in Upa's village, which is fine, but it also happens to be right next to Karin Tower, the exact and perfect place he needs to get stronger following his encounter with Tao. Secondly, once Tao is hired, without knowing anything about the location he needs to travel to other than the general vague direction and guesstimated distance, Tao Pai Pai lands exactly where Goku is standing at the base of Karin Tower. It is an hilarious, albeit suspension of disbelief shattering moment. And finally, despite being referred to as the world's greatest assassin, once Tao Pai Pai downs Goku, he never thinks to confirm the kill despite Goku demonstrating that he's remarkably durable and resilient beyond anything he's come across thus far. Through not checking his body, he doesn't notice the Dragon Ball on his person which blocked the blast in the first place, and pretty much goes off for countless hours if not days shopping for an outfit while Goku is given all the time he needs to train with Karin. None of these of course are deal breakers. I love this exchange. The fight with Tao is still awesome, but it does play a role in making the Red Ribbon Army arc, for me at least, one of the more difficult arcs to get through upon rereads. But hey, at least Karin Tower's training was great. I wish I could say the same for the King Piccolo arc. Now, you might be thinking, oh wow, Toriyama does the exact same thing there again when King Piccolo thinks he killed Goku, only for him to come back to life and scale the tower and get stronger again. But you'd be wrong in thinking that, because it's actually way worse. What happens is, unlike Tao, who was lazy, King Piccolo actually does his due diligence to check to see if Goku was actually alive. He confirms that he's dead and then leaves, only for Goku to, for some reason, somehow, come back to life again. None of this is explained. It just happens. His heart stopped beating just long enough for King Piccolo to leave and then start up again. This is probably the biggest contrivance in all of the Dragon Ball manga's original run. Oh, and yeah, the Ultra Divine Water sucks. It's a worse version of what happened before, totally unearned, blah blah blah. But okay, look, while it might look like this King Piccolo stuff suggests Toriyama didn't learn anything from his past difficulties with Tao, in actuality, it likely has more to do with Toriyama's reported poor health during this period of serialization. I'm inclined to believe this, as despite the unfavorable light I just painted the King Piccolo arc with, it's undeniable that every main villain introduced henceforth would be a home run for the franchise. But that's enough story for now. How about we look at some juicy inconsistencies and blatant mistakes, like Yamcha's leg from the 22nd Tenkaichi Budokai. As seen during their match, Ten Shinhan breaks Yamcha's left leg. For the rest of the tournament, as well as the King Piccolo story itself, he is pictured with a cast on that leg. That is, until chapter 161, when Yamcha is seen with a cast on his right leg instead. But this wasn't the last time Toriyama made a mistake with Yamcha's character design either. Moments before androids 19 and 20 arrive on the scene, Yamcha is pictured with an older hairstyle for a split second before returning back to his updated modern hairstyle. Poor Yamcha. Toriyama keeps forgetting him. There are, of course, other examples of design mishaps and mistakes in the series, but most of them are results of filling in the wrong amount of black when it should have been left white. Funnily enough, those aren't even Toriyama's mistakes either. They're his assistants. Their job was to fill in the blacks of Toriyama's drawings, and famously, Toriyama designed the Super Saiyan form itself to have white or blonde hair in order to reduce his assistant's workload, filling in all those pesky black segments. Sticking with even more Dragon Ball inconsistencies, a stated rule of the Tenkaichi Budokai is that no foreign objects or weapons are permitted in the tournament. And as we've seen with the likes of Tao Pai Pai, who was disqualified when he pulled a knife during his bout with Ten Shinhan, disqualification was inevitable. This makes sense, rules are important, blah blah blah. However, what happens during Kami and Piccolo's matchup is something of a gray area? Pulling out a foreign object in the form of a vial to house Piccolo within using the Mafuba, Piccolo ends up Uno reversing the Guardian of Earth's efforts and seals him away instead. Naturally, I don't think the adjudicators and officials realize the extent of what took place, but surely they can see what has been done could not have taken place without the small foreign object that was used. Is it a foul? I'm not really sure, but I kinda lean towards yes. If you think it is a foul, then that means that Goku actually won the tournament way ahead of when he thought he did. Alright, let's move on to Dragon Ball Z.
Alright lads, it's time for a word from our wonderful sponsors at ExpressVPN. You know what sucks? Dragon Ball Daima. I mean, Dragon Ball Daima's English dub being locked away behind region locks for us fans here in Europe. I don't actually hate Dragon Ball Daima, please don't hurt me. Thankfully, with ExpressVPN, you can avoid all of those pesky region lock restrictions with just the click of a button. With 105 countries to choose from, I've not only been able to check out Daima's dub on Crunchyroll, but I've also been able to get access to great films like Parasite on Netflix, which, I mean, as films go, it's just like, it's one of those films where you sit down, you watch it, and you think to yourself, I'll never be good enough to make anything like that. Personal reflections on my own inadequacy aside, with sites like Netflix raising their prices yet again, you can actually get access to Netflix cheaper in general by swapping to a different country. And entertainment aside, we're kind of in an era now where online privacy is of paramount importance, perhaps more so than ever before. UK and Australian ISPs are required by law to log your activity for 2 years, and US ISPs actually sell your data to companies. And God knows what else they're going to do. But if you use ExpressVPN, you can encrypt and reroute all of your network traffic through their secure servers, which means those pesky ISPs no longer have access to your activities. They're kindly offering 4 months for free, so be sure to scan the QR code on screen or head over to expressvpn.com/notmark for all of the details. The link, of course, is in the description, and again, that is expressvpn.com/notmark. Head on over there and you can find out how to get 4 months for free.
When it came to Raditz versus the joined forces of Goku and Piccolo, I think we can all agree it was a short but very fun battle, hinting towards the potential Gohan would ultimately offer the story moving forward. But I can't be the only one who thought Goku didn't need to die here. You know the way people complain about there being enough room for Jack on that door Rose is floating on during the Titanic? Well, this is my Titanic. Why didn't Goku just grab his tail again? What reason is there for him not to? The circumstances are practically the exact same. The only real difference difference is that Goku is weaker and more injured, which is even more of a reason he should have grabbed his tail again in the first place. I don't know. It's a little clunky, but I do ultimately understand why Toriyama went this way. It is a great encounter after all. Sticking with the nitpicking and contrivances, in chapter 28 of Dragon Ball Z, Vegeta reads Goku's incoming power as a huge problem and urgently instructs Nappa to kill them all before he arrives. I mean, I get it. He wants to eradicate all the players on the field because them with Goku could prove to be a lot more trouble than they're prepared for. It makes sense. But why didn't Vegeta do it too? Even if he did believe that Nappa had this all in the bag, surely he would be able to get it done faster, and time is of the essence after all. It's a shame really, because if Vegeta took this proactive approach, he could have won easily. Though I suppose Yajirobe would still be lurking around there somewhere. While I do love the Saiyan saga more than most sane human beings probably should, it has some of the most convenient and retroactively convenient moments of the series. First up, we have Goku traveling to the battlefield. When this was written, Goku traveling via the Nimbus Cloud was a totally reasonable choice. However, due to what Toriyama wrote Popo to be capable of doing with his magic carpet immediately following this battle, one must wonder, why didn't Popo just teleport him to the action in the first place? I guess Gohan and Piccolo wouldn't have had time to have their epic sacrificial moment then, so in some ways I am happy Popo was stingy in that moment. On to the second issue. During the closing moments of the Vegeta fight, Gohan regenerates his tail at a time so perfect, God himself couldn't have divined it more timely. 1 second it's there, all is lost, and boom, tail. I love the moment that stems from this, but goddamn does it feel like Toriyama loved the thought of Vegeta being crushed by the symbol of Saiyan supremacy so much that he just said, fuck it, we ball, and drew it anyway. Logic be damned. But to be fair, it is a great moment. The fight would have been worse without it, and it was also one of the very first episodes of Dragon Ball that I saw. I guess Gohan's crushing of Vegeta left an impression not just on the Saiyan Prince, but me as well. Very funny. Finally, there's the Spirit Bomb being bounceable by those pure of heart. Like most of Toriyama's writing, this doesn't directly contradict anything, but it is a new property of the technique that's revealed at a moment right before it's needed. All to facilitate, again, a brilliant and memorable moment, but it does come at the cost of feeling a little contrived. Which honestly doesn't really matter much, because even with all those things I just outlined, this arc still rules. Let's move on to the Namek Saga, because this one I stumbled across only very recently. In chapter 55, Zarbon and Dodoria react to Vegeta's new power level of 24,000. Zarbon goes on to explain that Vegeta's level is higher now than either of theirs. Acknowledging this, Frieza remarks that Vegeta still shouldn't be an issue if they were to fight him together. None of this is really an issue until chapters 69 and 70 roll around, where Zarbon reveals that he has had this gross transformation up his sleeve the entire time, and more than that, Frieza knew about it too, thus contradicting the exchange that took place in chapter 55. I like inconsistencies like these because it inadvertently shows Toriyama's thought process. By chapter 55, he hadn't yet considered transformation for the likes of Zarbon or perhaps any of the other characters like Frieza, but by 69, those ideas had well and truly taken root. After all, the term Super Saiyan wasn't first used during the Namek or Frieza sagas like many of you might recall. It was first used during the Saiyan saga by Nappa, who referred to the hybrid of Saiyans and humans as yielding a Super Saiyan of sorts. Somewhat different to the legend it would ultimately be retconned into being later. In chapter 133 of Dragon Ball Z, for some reason, Gohan needs to inform Bulma that Krillin can't be brought back to life because he's already been revived using the Dragon Balls once before. He needs to tell her this, even though she was literally part of the conversations that illuminated those very limitations in the first place. And look, people can forget, Bulma's human after all, but she's also the smartest human in the world. That's sort of her whole bag, right? And so I think it's clear that this bizarre conversation between these two only really exists to allow Dende to overhear. Because once he does, he then goes on to explain how the Namekian Dragon Balls have no such limitations. It's a clunky piece of storytelling, but ultimately it is inoffensive. What I enjoy about this little clunk is that it again shows us more of that flying by the seat of his pants storytelling Toriyama was famous for, creating narrative solutions to problems in real time. Sometimes they are seamless, but other times they are a little more obvious. Kinda like this next one. And while it is by far the most petty inclusion so far, I do think it's kinda funny. Following the events of the Frieza saga, Yamcha and Ten Shinhan are both brought back to the land of the living. Hooray, right? Despite having his hand punched off by Nappa, Ten Shinhan is restored with his hand intact, but Yamcha's scars are still there? Why? I'll tell you why, because that's what his toy looks like, and goddammit, kids need an obvious way to differentiate Yamcha from Goku. But, of course, to round out my nitpicks from the Namek arc, I would be remiss if I didn't give an honorable mention to the giant fish that came out of absolutely nowhere to distract Vegeta from discovering the Earthlings at the exact right moment. Man, first his tail regenerates, and now this. Gohan is one lucky kid. Actually, maybe Vegeta's just really unlucky? Okay, so around now would be about the time that I get into some Cell stuff. But to be honest, I don't think I have much to say about this arc because most of the main inconsistencies are, 1, already widely known, and 2, weren't Toriyama's fault. Stuff like androids 19 and 20 being changed to 17 and 18, and then those guys being benched for Cell in his subsequent transformations, were all due to editorial suggestion, and that's common knowledge at this point. If you didn't know that, then welcome to the internet. But jokes aside, those are cool examples of Toriyama's proficiency when it comes to pivoting a story in a very natural manner. Though I will say that there is a mistake that even those eagle-eyed amongst you might not have seen. It's another minor coloring mistake on the first page of Dragon Ball Z chapter 161. Following the battle with Android 17 and 18, Trunks, Piccolo, Tenshinhan, and Vegeta are left lying on the rubble below, utterly defeated, but hilariously, you can see that Toriyama's assistant never colored in Piccolo. What I like about this is that you can see Toriyama even went to the trouble of marking the areas that needed inking with an X. It's an easy mistake to make, and to be perfectly honest, one that I would absolutely make because I didn't even see Piccolo lying on that rubble. But of course, this isn't to say that Toriyama didn't make honest mistakes during this arc either. Famously, in Dragon Ball Z chapter 196, Toriyama decided to cut Trunks' hair and maintained that bowl cut look right through to chapter 200, which was entitled The Cell Games Begin. However, by the time he touches down on the battlefield in chapter 201, Toriyama, I guess, decided to Play-Doh that hair right out and over his neck again. What a king.
By the way, Trunks, wasn't your hair, shorter yesterday?
Yeah, I decided I liked it longer.
Neat!
Moving swiftly on, I always found it funny looking back on the Namek material and reading Frieza say stuff to Goku like, "He never dreamed someone more powerful than Captain Ginyu would have shown up." Now I find that funny not just because Frieza had literally just fought the likes of Gohan, Piccolo, and a super-powered Vegeta, all of whom are at this point much more powerful than Ginyu, but also because in the canon special, Yo, Son Goku and His Friends Return, the villains of the story, Avo and Kado, were apparently ranked alongside the Ginyu Force during Namek and somehow, on their adventures, managed to get stronger than Frieza himself too. And okay, yeah, alright, I know I said I wouldn't talk about power levels, but that and this next one from Resurrection F broke my brain. According to Frieza, he never trained a day in his life because he never saw a need to. This would be fine if not for what happened next. Over the course of a few months, Frieza becomes stronger than Super Saiyan Blue Goku, with his stamina being the only reason he ended up losing. This is weird, not just because, well, you know, holy shit, it's ridiculous, but also because it radically reframes the Namek saga and Frieza's fear of the legendary Super Saiyan for the worse. It transforms this compelling and visceral fear Frieza has into a simple act of laziness. Just a small, tiny bit of effort, and this guy could have gotten thousands of times stronger than a Super Saiyan. And so, thanks to Resurrection F, it has become canon that Frieza feared exercise far more than the legendary Super Saiyan threat, which might be the funniest thing Toriyama has ever unintentionally written. Circling back to the special for just a brief second, but what's the deal with Tarble, Vegeta's younger brother? The guy looks like a teenager, but quite literally cannot be more than 5 or 6 years younger than Vegeta. So you're telling me that this kid is in his 40s or 50s? To be clear, this isn't really a mistake or an inconsistency as much as it is just something that makes me feel unreasonably uncomfortable. Also, that's his wife. How about that? When it comes to Dragon Ball Super, there are, of course, a lot of these inconsistencies that have yet to be addressed, most of which I would assume don't have anything to do with Akira Toriyama. But let's get into it. Beerus claims that he has eradicated the dinosaurs, but we see them all over Dragon Ball, and there's even one in the film he makes this very claim. Additionally, we see future Trunks' hair change from lavender to teal, but perhaps the king of inconsistency is Krillin and his height. The guy cannot catch a break. I know it's minor, but this guy goes from reasonably short but still normal to downright fun-sized by the time Super rolls around. And speaking of height, according to the Dragon Ball timeline, Trunks should have been much taller during the Universe Survival arc, given that this was the same year the History of Trunks chapter supposedly took place during future Trunks' timeline. But by far, the most glaring and frankly annoying plot holes in the entire series for me have been those found in the Future Trunks arc. First off, after a certain point in the arc, none of the timeline claims made by either Whis, Goasu, or even the guidebooks trying to explain it have any logic behind them. It makes no sense, which, honestly, I could get past if not for this scene.
What the fuck happened? What happened?
Without knowing that the technique even existed, let alone was even possible, Trunks randomly starts to use the Genki Dama to form a spirit sword to cut Fusamasu in half. It is a wild decision creatively to make, and the worst part is, it doesn't even kill him! But yeah, that's about it. There is of course a plot hole in practically every piece of fiction ever made, but when it comes to something as old and beloved as Dragon Ball, for me there's something fun about getting to see these small mistakes because it almost feels like you're seeing a new side of a formative story that you grew up with. It's novel. These are moments in time where the shiny forward-facing facade of the Dragon Ball story gave way and offered a brief glimpse into the mind of one of Japan's greatest. Immortalized in these moments of indecision, inconsistency, and in some cases contrivance, I can't help but enjoy them more and more upon each read-through. But, to be honest, this fun video has kinda given me an idea. It's gotten me to wonder if maybe these mistakes or inconsistencies could be fixed without changing the story that surrounds them. Is there a way to help Goku survive his first fight against King Piccolo and still create a circumstance for him to climb Karin Tower? Is there a way to make Trunks having a spirit sword possible? Probably not with that last one, but I think I want to try. So, tune in next week to see if I can fill in these plot holes without altering the story surrounding them. Subscribe if you don't want to miss that or my upcoming tribute project I've been working on for Akira Toriyama to honor his passing in a few short weeks. But until then, I've been Totally Not Mark, and as always, thank you all so much for watching.